Hello. The title of this video is which is more basic, time or abstraction? Throughout this video, I'll be exploring that topic out loud. But I'm not going to have any final answer for you, any absolute answer. I don't pretend to have that, and I don't aim to look for that necessarily. But, so what about it? So what do I mean first? Which is more basic, time or abstraction? I said time first. What do I mean by time? Well, what I mean by time in this case is time as such. You might say, well, hold on. What do you mean as such? What are you saying? Well, time as such, that phrase is pointing to time itself. I'm not talking about a particular instantiation of time. I'm not talking about last Wednesday or next Tuesday, but just time itself. So we're comparing time as such with abstraction as such, which is more basic, which is more fundamental. Lastly, I should explain what do I mean by basic or fundamental. Well, for example, you could ask which is more basic, cake or flour? I would argue flour is more basic than cake because a traditional cake requires flour. So if you need the flour to make a cake, then the flour is more basic. And then in programming language, you might say that cake uses the flour object. But I mean, well, in Java, you can only inherit one object. So that might not be a very good analogy. But I think you get what I'm saying. It isn't quite the same thing to say that flour comes before cake, because we're asking more abstractly, which is more basic. All right, so how basic is time and how basic is abstraction? Is one more basic than the other? Are they siblings? Did they both come about by one parent? Which order does this go? This is a very tricky question, and I can only lay out some preliminary tools for you. But as I ask myself this question, well, here's a couple examples. One example is you can look at life. So you have a cell which uses DNA. And that DNA is instructions, step by step, how to build this protein, that protein. So maybe it says first you need to build protein B. Here's how you do that. You need 2 protein C's and then another protein B. But that's abstraction. The reason that's abstraction is because the instruction for how to build the protein isn't itself the protein. If it were, you could argue that it's not using abstraction. But in that example, you would just have a cell which plans to procreate by using its own living body as its instruction for how to build itself. That's not what we see nature doing. Instead, the cell is using the abstraction of chemical instructions and how to build itself. So in that case, we could say that abstraction as such is more basic than life as such, as we know it. For multicellular life, if you wanted to be more example, I would argue further than that, but we don't have to go further than we have to go. What about time? Is abstraction necessarily more basic than time? That's where that example doesn't help you, because certainly life is more basic than time and abstraction. So from there, we would have to say we don't know. Here's another point of view. Now, you don't have to believe in a point of view to get value from temporarily using that point of view. Can I give a brief example of that? You might have a point of view that the direction of down isn't towards the center of whatever planet it is that you're on. Instead, down just means some other abstraction you have of what down is. Well, that might be close enough to the truth to keep you alive, although it isn't quite right. It isn't the whole story. All right, so this point of view we're going to take is monotheism. Again, monotheism doesn't even have to be true as a model for it to yield some helpful insights into asking this question. All right, which version of monotheism? If you're asking which version, I think you're paying for more than you need, because you don't have to ask this question from the point of view of Judaism or Christianity or any particular version of monotheism. You only need monotheism itself as like a parent object. All right, so from that point of view, with the monotheism object point of view, which is older, time or abstraction? Now we're getting somewhere. Well, could say that God created this universe, and in doing so, he would have created a limited frame of time. And if we allow for that, then most likely, depending on which version of monotheism you're looking at, you probably have abstraction being more basic than time, because God was, maybe before time existed, we could say God was wondering what kind of universe does he, she, or it prefer. You might argue on the other side of that and say, well, yes, in that case, you could say that abstraction as such is older than a given created time frame, maybe with a beginning, middle, and end. That doesn't necessarily mean that abstraction as such is more basic than time as such. What you'd have to do from that point of view is something like argue that that limited time frame was also when time itself was created. But if that isn't the case, then you could have a model where God is actually in this other frame of time. It's some kind of fractal thing where there's frames of time within frames of time. And you can't say abstraction as such is older than time as such from that argument. You'd have to do that work. I can't answer that question for you. All right, we can take those monotheism glasses off. All right, what have we learned? Let's say we're not a monotheist. What have we learned? Well, in asking whether time or abstraction is more basic, we could say that abstraction as such is, well, certainly at least as basic as any what do I want to say? Any child of time, any frame of time that was built with or consists of abstraction. Maybe we're making a little progress here. See, we could now take our evolutionary biology goggles, but I bet this won't get us too far. The reason for that has to do with a little concept called ontology. Let's try that, okay? Ask a biologist, is time more basic than abstraction, or what kind of relationship is there? And the biologist would say, well, as we discussed earlier, life as we know it is less basic than abstraction as such, because it uses abstraction into its being, to make its being, to allow for it. But from there, I can't really help you, because time is kind of a tool we usually take for granted. I can't tell you much about time as such. And comparing that to abstraction as such, you're talking to the wrong guy. You might ask a physicist. So you go to a physicist and you ask the physicist, which is more abstract, time as such or abstraction as such? Now, here's where my limited knowledge doesn't help me a whole lot, because I don't know what a physicist would tell you, but I bet he'll tell you that he would say, or she would say, I don't really know. I don't really have the right tools to answer that question. And he or she might refer you to a philosopher, because a philosopher is the person familiar with the tools on the scale that you would need to ask a question like that, right? That's sort of what ontology is. I don't even know the definition of ontology, but I know I was using it, an example of it, in what I was just saying. Well, after all this, I mean, that was quite a bit of work. We haven't gotten hardly anywhere. You might ask, why does this matter? Why does it matter to my life whether time is more abstract or more basic than abstraction itself, or what their relationship is? Well, to argue to keep you around, I might ask you to ask what use is it generally to look at abstraction itself? What role does abstraction play in my life? Is abstraction a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Well, it certainly can be a good thing because abstraction will keep you alive. You might make a deal with someone where they will give you protection now and you give them food later. You couldn't do that with that other person unless you were, in this case, we're humans. We can't do that unless we're animals that are capable of abstraction and a social interaction level. And then, of course, you could say that abstraction as such is necessary for life. So, of course, it's more basic. But, So, as a human being, I guess I have no choice but to deal with abstraction. I have to have some kind of relationship with it. Can abstraction kill me? My answer to that is absolutely. You might read your gas gauge on your motor vehicle. It might say that your gas is empty, and you might put some gas in. That doesn't work out for you. Turned out it was actually full, but you believe that it was empty because you generally trust your gauges, and that results in maybe you getting hurt. There's all kinds of ways abstractions can hurt you. Now, hunger can hurt you. Hunger isn't an abstraction. When it relates to you, it doesn't relate to you as if it were an abstraction. It relates to you as if, it's hunger. Eat something now or you're dead. How does abstraction help you with that? This is where I would bring up the relationship between abstraction and negotiation. This here is my cat. She's a predator. And historically, I guess she's crawling into a paper bag, but historically, they get food by eating meat. They will eat grass. Grass is good for their digestion, but they won't gain nearly a significant fraction of their daily calories from the plant, because even if they could digest the plant down, they wouldn't get enough calories from it, and they're not even built to do that to begin with, so they need meat. So how do you get meat if you're a cat? Why does abstraction do anything like this? Well, let's see. Let's say a large cat finds what are they called? We wouldn't say a pack of prey, would we? Some kind of herd. What does it have to do? Well, it has to pick a member of the herd and take it down. Let's say it's a lion. So the lion approaches the herd. It finds a problem. As it's ready to pounce on a member of the herd, it realizes that the one it was following isn't. The one it was originally following is shifted. It thought it was following this one, but it's actually that one. And if it were to jump right this minute, instead of hitting a member of the prey on whatever part of the body it's aiming for, it's just going to miss and maybe get run over. That's no good. So the cat, the feline, the large predator, it has to have an abstraction. It has to pick out a prey, say, in a few moments you're going to move from here to here. I'm going to aim for where your neck will be in a second and a half, grab hold of you specifically, and then I can use that meat for my family, etc. All right, we can bring up zebras here. They're an interesting example. Why do zebras have stripes? You've probably heard this before, and I'm only 90-ish% true that it's true. It's not the whole story, but here's a useful little story. So zebras have stripes because if you're a lion trying to pick down a zebra, it's hard to pick a zebra because all you see is a great big mass of black and white stripes. But you have to pick a zebra, and that makes it harder for you. So the zebras, each other, are negotiating to appear to be a great massive zebra rather than individual zebras, because that helps them. Now, nature is a very good negotiator. If a member of a zebra family is killed, is that zebra family terribly concerned about that? Not necessarily. It might even be mutually beneficial for a small number of felines to take down a member of the zebra family. Why? Well, there's limited food resources. And so if there's some kind of force which is curbing the number of you that are around, not decimating it, that might be helpful. And so the predator is actually being useful to nature. It's being useful to the prey. The prey are, of course, useful to the predator. I would say useful to nature. I might get myself into trouble wording it that way, because if I say that the predator is useful to nature, I make it sound like nature has a purpose, and then I have to open my epistemological pocketbook and wonder how much it would cost me to prove that nature has a purpose as such. I'm not going to touch that one in this video. But yeah, it's interesting. Oh, so anyway, the original question is, what is more basic? Time as such, or abstraction as such? All I really have for you so far is to say that abstraction as such is more basic than a particular limited frame of time if abstraction was used to create that particular limited time frame. Then that would logically follow. You know, that's a good piece of the puzzle for you. You might not be able to visualize it now, but all of this problem as we've been tackling it, it's all a puzzle piece. And I've been pointing to certain concepts and saying, well, look at this, what do you think of that? You're looking at a puzzle and you're like, well, this piece would go not here, but here, and you're building that. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you think this is a interesting question or a useful question. Or maybe it's something that might be useful to know, but we human beings can't suspect to have any kind of even tenable answer. So maybe it's not worth our time. Unless you thought the question was interesting, in which case you could explore it at your leisure. But yeah, that's interesting. These are some interesting topics too. I could throw in there whether negotiation as such is older, but you don't have to do that. Feel free to. So yeah, feel free to leave a comment, share your thoughts, and have a nice day.